"Mom, what are you doing here? Why are you living here? What happened while I was gone?" I didn't know she was my mother back then, but I never stopped helping her. 8 years after leaving America, Ava Bennett returned home, expecting to surprise her mother with flowers and a suitcase full of gifts. Instead, less than an hour after landing in Tacoma, she found herself standing inside an abandoned bus depot at the edge of the city. Between rusted benches and boarded-up ticket windows, an elderly woman slept on a folding cot, with a worn blanket pulled to her chin. Beside her sat a faded suitcase and 2 plastic grocery bags. The woman was Ava's mother, and the truth behind how she ended up there was far worse than homelessness. A week earlier, everything still seemed normal, at least normal from thousands of miles away. Ava Bennett was 40 years old and living in Munich, Germany. She worked as a pediatric nurse at a children's hospital. The job was demanding. Long shifts, sleepless nights, holidays spent at work more often than at home. But she never complained. Every month, no matter how busy life became, she sent money back to Tacoma. Not because anyone asked her to, but because of her mother. Eleanor Bennett had raised 2 children alone after her husband died unexpectedly when Ava was 13. There had been years when money barely stretched to the end of the week. Years when Eleanor skipped meals so her children could eat. Years when she worked 2 jobs and still came home smiling because she didn't want her children carrying her worries. Ava never forgot those years. That was why she bought Eleanor a small house shortly after moving overseas. Nothing fancy, just a comfortable place with a front porch, a garden, and enough space for her mother to grow tomatoes in the summer. It had been Eleanor's dream, and for years, Ava believed that dream was safe. Ryan lived nearby. Her younger brother handled things on the ground. He paid bills, checked on their mother, handled repairs. At least that was what he always said. Every phone call sounded the same. "Mom's doing fine. The house is fine. Don't worry about anything." Ryan's wife, Melissa, usually appeared somewhere in the background. Friendly, polite, never warm, but never openly hostile either. Ava had no reason to suspect anything. Life has a way of rewarding trust until the day it doesn't. The decision to come home had been spontaneous. One evening after work, Ava was sitting alone in her apartment when she realized it had been 8 years, 8 birthdays, 8 Christmases, 8 summers, all missed. The money transfers had become routine. The video calls had become shorter, and suddenly she felt tired of watching her family through a screen. She booked the ticket that night. She told nobody. Not Ryan, not Melissa, not even Eleanor. She wanted to see her mother's face when she opened the door. She imagined the surprise 100 times. What she never imagined was that her mother would not be there. The flight landed on a gray afternoon. Tacoma looked exactly as she remembered. The same damp air, the same clouds hanging low over the city, the same smell of rain on pavement. For a moment, she felt like she had never left. She rented a car and drove toward the neighborhood where her mother lived. Halfway there, she stopped at a grocery store to buy flowers, a simple bouquet of yellow daisies, Eleanor's favorite. Then she continued driving. The closer she got, the more excited she became, until she turned onto the street, and everything changed. She slowed down, looked again, then stopped completely. The house wasn't there. Not damaged, not abandoned. Gone. The entire property had been cleared. Construction fencing surrounded the lot. Heavy equipment sat behind the fence. A sign advertised future townhomes. Ava stared through the windshield. Her hands tightened around the steering wheel. For several seconds, her brain refused to process what she was seeing. Maybe she had the wrong address. Maybe she had taken a wrong turn. But she hadn't. This was the place. The oak tree near the sidewalk was still there. The mailbox post remained near the curb. Everything was familiar, except the house. A woman walking a dog noticed her sitting there. "Can I help you?" she asked. Ava rolled down the window. There was a house here. The woman looked confused. "The Bennett place." Ava nodded. The woman hesitated. Then her expression changed. "Oh." It was a small word, but something about the way she said it made Ava's stomach tighten. "What happened?" Ava asked. The woman looked uncomfortable. "I thought someone would have told you." "Told me what?" Before the woman could answer, another voice spoke behind them. A middle-aged man wearing a county identification badge stepped out of a parked vehicle. He had apparently overheard enough to understand. He looked at Ava carefully. "You're Ava Bennett, aren't you?" Her heart skipped. "Yes." The man sighed. For a moment, he looked like someone deciding how much truth another person could handle. Then he said quietly, "Your mother isn't here anymore." Ava felt cold. "Where is she?" The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he glanced toward his vehicle, toward a folder sitting on the passenger seat, then back at her. Finally, he said, "If you're willing, I'll take you to her." 20 minutes later, Ava followed his truck across town, past warehouses, past rail yards, past streets she had never visited before. Eventually, they reached an abandoned bus depot near the edge of the city. Broken windows, faded signs, empty platforms. The place looked forgotten. The county worker parked, got out, and led her inside. Ava followed in silence. Then she saw a folding cot, a worn blanket, a suitcase, and her mother. Eleanor opened her eyes slowly. For one brief second, she looked confused. Then she recognized her daughter. The flowers slipped from Ava's hand. Neither woman spoke. Neither needed to. The shock was already saying everything. Tears filled Eleanor's eyes. Not loud tears. Not dramatic tears. Just the quiet kind that come from carrying too much for too long. Ava knelt beside her. "What happened?" Eleanor looked away, toward the cracked concrete floor, toward the old suitcase, toward everything she had lost. Then she whispered something that made Ava's blood run cold. "The house wasn't lost." She paused. "It was taken." For a long moment, neither of them moved. Ava remained kneeling beside the folding cot. Eleanor sat there with tears in her eyes, her hands wrapped around the thin blanket, as if she were afraid someone might take even that away. The abandoned depot was quiet, except for distant traffic outside. It smelled faintly of dust and damp concrete. This wasn't a place where anyone's mother should have been living, especially not hers. Ava reached for her mother's hand. It felt colder than she remembered. Thinner, too. "Mama?" That was all she managed before her voice broke. Eleanor squeezed her hand gently. "I'm sorry you had to see this." Those words hurt more than anything else. Not because of what they meant, but because Eleanor sounded ashamed, as if she had somehow failed, as if she were the one who needed forgiveness. Ava shook her head. "No, don't do that." Eleanor looked away. People who had suffered quietly for too long often struggled to accept comfort. The county worker, whose name was Mark, explained what he knew. The house had been foreclosed on, the property sold at auction. Ava's brother, Ryan, had been listed as the primary contact for all legal notices. He had signed off on the sale. Ava felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. Ryan? Why would he do this? Mark explained that Eleanor had been offered temporary shelter, but she'd refused. She kept saying she had to stay near the house, near her things. Ava looked at her mother, who was still staring at the floor. "Her things?" Mark nodded. She said she was waiting for her daughter to come home. Ava's eyes welled up. Her mother had been waiting for her, for 8 years, in an abandoned bus depot, because she thought Ava would come back for her. The next few days were a blur. Ava found a motel room for her mother, bought her new clothes, and listened to Eleanor's fragmented story. Ryan had told her the house was being renovated. He'd moved her out, promising she'd be back soon. But soon never came. He stopped answering her calls. Melissa, his wife, had been equally evasive. Eleanor, confused and alone, had drifted, always returning to the empty lot where her home once stood, until she found the bus depot. Ava called Ryan. He sounded surprised, then defensive. "What are you doing here, Ava? I told you everything was fine." "Fine? Mom is living in a bus depot. The house is gone." Ryan's voice hardened. "It was a bad investment, Ava. The market crashed. I had to sell it to cover the mortgage. It was for her own good." Ava felt a surge of fury. "For her own good? You let her become homeless." The conversation devolved into shouting, accusations, and finally, Ryan hanging up. Ava knew she needed help. She contacted a lawyer, but without proof, it was her word against Ryan's. Then she remembered Mark, the county worker. He had mentioned a social worker who had been trying to help Eleanor. Her name was Lauren. Ava tracked Lauren down at the county social services office. Lauren was a kind, weary woman who recognized Eleanor's name immediately. "I've been trying to help her for 2 years," Lauren said, her voice heavy with frustration. She wouldn't accept permanent shelter. She kept saying her son was taking care of things. Lauren opened a folder on her phone. It contained dozens of files: photographs, dates, case notes, shelter referrals, outreach reports, everything organized, everything time-stamped. Ava looked at Lauren in surprise. "You kept all this?" Lauren nodded. "That's how our program worked. We documented encounters when vulnerable adults needed services." Ava felt something shift. For the first time since returning home, the truth felt tangible. Not memories, not accusations, but evidence. The kind that could survive scrutiny, the kind people couldn't simply deny. Lauren showed her another photograph. Eleanor, standing near a temporary shelter registration table. Another showed her carrying 2 plastic bags through the rain. Another showed her sleeping area inside the depot. Each image had dates, locations, notes. The oldest photo was nearly 2 years old. 2 years. Ava stared at it. Ryan had told her everything was fine during those 2 years. Every phone call, every holiday, every conversation. The betrayal suddenly felt larger. Not one lie, hundreds of them. That evening, Ava returned to the motel, carrying copies of everything Lauren was willing to share. When she entered the room, Eleanor was watching television. The volume was low, the kind of background noise lonely people often use to make a room feel less empty. Ava sat beside her. For several moments, she said nothing. Then she carefully handed over the photograph, the one showing Eleanor sitting outside the depot. Eleanor looked at it, then lowered her eyes. No surprise, no shock, only sadness. "I didn't know anyone took pictures." Lauren's name immediately came to Ava's mind. This woman had unknowingly spent years documenting the life of the mother she lost. The thought felt almost impossible, yet somehow completely real. Life wasn't neat. Sometimes connections only made sense years later. Ava gently touched her mother's hand. "Mom?" Eleanor looked up. "Why didn't you tell me?" The question came from somewhere deeper this time. Not anger, not accusation, but pain. Eleanor understood immediately. She looked away, toward the motel curtains, toward the rain-darkened parking lot. "I didn't want to be your burden." The answer nearly broke Ava. For years, she had worked double shifts, missed holidays, skipped vacations, sent money home every month. Not because she felt obligated, but because she loved her mother. The idea that Eleanor had suffered alone to avoid becoming a burden felt unbearable. "You were never a burden." Eleanor smiled sadly. "Children always say that. I mean it. I know." Then she squeezed Ava's hand. "But parents spend their whole lives protecting their children." Ava looked down, because deep inside, she understood. Not agreed, but understood. A mother could make terrible decisions when love became mixed with fear. The next morning brought another surprise. A knock came at the motel door shortly after 9. Ava opened it expecting room service. Instead, she found a boy standing there, maybe 12 years old, thin, nervous, holding a backpack. She recognized him immediately from family photographs. Ryan's son, Noah. For a second, neither spoke. Then Noah looked past Ava toward the room. "Is Grandma okay?" The question was so sincere that Ava's anger immediately softened. "She's okay." Relief flooded his face. He stepped inside. Eleanor rose from her chair the moment she saw him. The boy crossed the room and hugged her. Tightly, without hesitation, without embarrassment, without conditions. Eleanor started crying. Real tears this time. The kind she had spent too long holding back. Noah held her hand and sat beside her. The affection between them was obvious, natural, nothing forced. Ava watched quietly. Then she noticed something. Noah looked scared. Not of Eleanor, not of her, but of being there. Eventually, Ava asked, "Does your dad know you're here?" The boy immediately looked down. That answered the question. "No." A long silence followed. Then Noah slowly opened his backpack. Inside was a cardboard box, old, worn, taped shut. He placed it on the table. Ava frowned. "What's this?" The boy swallowed. For several seconds, he couldn't seem to find the words. Finally, He looked at Eleanor, then at Ava. "I think Grandma needs this." A chill moved through Ava. "What is it?" Noah's fingers trembled slightly. "Stuff my dad told me not to touch." The room became very quiet. The boy carefully opened the lid. Inside were envelopes, bank statements, printed emails, photocopies, documents, years of documents. Ava stared. Noah looked ashamed, as if he felt guilty for bringing them. "You shouldn't have gone through private things." The boy shook his head. "I didn't." His voice cracked slightly. They were in the garage. Ava waited. Noah looked directly at her for the first time. "I started keeping copies because I thought something was wrong." The honesty stunned her. A 12-year-old child had seen what adults chose not to see or refused to see. Eleanor's eyes filled again. Not because of the papers, but because of the boy. Because somebody had been paying attention. Noah reached deeper into the box, pulled out a thick envelope, and handed it to Ava. She opened it slowly. Inside were financial records, wire transfers, bank withdrawals, property documents. The first few pages were already enough to make her pulse race. But then she reached the last few. They were copies of the original deed, showing Eleanor as the sole owner, and then a forged power of attorney, giving Ryan full control. And finally, the sale documents, showing Ryan had sold the house for a significant profit, pocketing all the money. The evidence was undeniable. Ava spent the next few weeks working with a lawyer, building a case against Ryan. It was a painful process, tearing her family apart, but she knew it had to be done. Eleanor deserved justice. Noah's testimony, combined with the documents he had saved, proved crucial. Ryan was eventually charged with fraud and elder abuse. Melissa, his wife, claimed ignorance, but the evidence suggested she had been complicit. They lost everything: their home, their savings, their reputation. The legal battle was long and emotionally draining, but eventually, Eleanor's house was returned to her. It was a shell, needing extensive repairs, but it was hers again. Ava decided to stay in Tacoma, to help her mother rebuild her life. She found a new job, a new apartment, and slowly, carefully, began to put the pieces back together. Eleanor, with Ava's support, began to heal. She started therapy, joined a seniors group, and slowly regained her trust in the world. The house, once a symbol of loss, became a symbol of resilience. Ava and Eleanor spent countless hours restoring it, painting walls, planting a new garden, filling it with laughter and new memories. Noah became a regular visitor. The 12-year-old practically treated the house as his second home. On weekends, he helped Eleanor plant flowers in the small backyard. Sometimes they spent hours working on puzzles. Sometimes they simply sat together watching old movies. There was something healing about their friendship. Neither demanded perfection from the other. Neither asked impossible questions. They simply enjoyed being together. More than once, Ava noticed Eleanor laughing with Noah in a way she hadn't laughed in years. The sound always stopped her for a moment, because it reminded her that recovery wasn't always dramatic. Sometimes it looked like an elderly woman laughing over a board game at the kitchen table. Lauren became part of the family almost without anyone noticing when it happened. At first, she visited cautiously, carefully, as though she were afraid that moving too fast might break something fragile. Years of uncertainty had taught her to protect herself. But each visit became easier. A shared lunch became a weekend visit. A weekend visit became Sunday dinners, then phone calls, then holidays, then ordinary things. The ordinary things mattered most. One afternoon, Ava walked into the kitchen and found Lauren helping Eleanor sort old photographs. Neither woman realized she was watching. They were laughing over a terrible haircut from the 1990s, arguing about dates, sharing stories, mother and daughter. Not perfectly, not magically, not as though 32 years had disappeared, but genuinely. They were building something real, and real things took time. One evening, several months after moving in, Eleanor finally opened the small memory box Lauren had carried into the motel conference room. Inside were drawings, birthday cards, school photographs, tiny pieces of a childhood that Eleanor had missed. She sat at the kitchen table, looking through them one by one. Sometimes smiling, sometimes crying, sometimes both. Lauren sat beside her, not speaking, just staying. The way people stay when words aren't enough. Ava watched from across the room. She realized something then. The greatest loss in Eleanor's life had never been the house. Not really. The house had simply exposed all the other losses that were already there. The loneliness, the silence, the distance, the years spent carrying pain alone. Now those things were changing. Slowly, but truly. Winter arrived. Then spring. The small garden behind the house began to bloom. One Saturday afternoon, the entire family gathered for lunch. Ava cooked. Noah complained about homework. Ryan assembled a crooked bird feeder that made everyone laugh. Lauren brought dessert. The kitchen was crowded. A little noisy, a little chaotic. Exactly the way family often was. At one point, Eleanor stepped away from the table to refill her coffee. No one noticed at first. Ava was arguing with Noah about vegetables. Ryan was fixing the bird feeder. Lauren was setting plates on the table. Eleanor simply stood there and watched. One daughter had returned home after 8 years abroad. Another daughter had found her after more than 3 decades apart. Her grandson was laughing in the next room. Her son was trying imperfectly but honestly to become better. For years she had believed she lost one child. Then she nearly lost another. And for a long time she had feared she would spend the rest of her life alone. Instead, life had brought her here. To a small kitchen. To a modest house. To people who finally saw her not as a burden, not as a problem, not as someone to be hidden away, but as family. Ava noticed the tears first. "Mom," everyone turned. Eleanor smiled and wiped her eyes. "I'm okay." Her voice shook slightly. "I'm just happy." Nobody made a joke. Nobody changed the subject because everyone understood. Some moments deserve to be felt completely. That evening, after dinner ended and the sun disappeared beyond the bay, Eleanor sat on the back porch between Ava and Lauren. The air was cool, the garden lights glowed softly. For a while they simply sat together. No explanations needed. No secrets left to uncover. No documents to chase. No court dates waiting ahead. Just 3 women sharing a quiet evening. Home had found her again. Not because a house was returned, but because the people she thought she had lost found their way back. And if this story left you thinking about someone you love, maybe take a moment to reach out to them. Sometimes the most important question isn't what someone needs, it's whether they're truly okay. And if this story touched your heart, feel free to share your thoughts below and join us again for another unforgettable story.